If there's one thing I've learned from studying prehistoric life, it's that evolution doesn't care about making sense. It just throws stuff at the wall and sees what survives. But every once in a while, evolution creates something so bizarre, so utterly incomprehensible, that even after we find the fossils, we still can't quite wrap our heads around what we're looking at. And nowhere is this more true than with one particular creature from the Cambrian period. A creature so weird that when scientists first started finding its fossils, they didn't just misidentify it. They thought they had discovered 3 completely separate animals: a jellyfish, a shrimp, and a sea cucumber. Except here's the problem. They were all the same animal. One single, nightmare-inducing predator that would rewrite everything we thought we knew about early life on Earth. Science built this monster out of 3 different animals, then realized it was real. Welcome to the absolutely bonkers story of Anomalocaris, which translates to abnormal shrimp. And trust me, that name doesn't even begin to capture how strange this thing actually was. Because Anomalocaris wasn't just weird. It was an apex predator of its time, one of the largest animals in the Cambrian seas, and quite possibly the first super predator in Earth's history. And we almost didn't figure out what it was at all. You're about to hear a story of scientific confusion, dramatic revelations, and a creature that, 500 million years later, still has paleontologists scratching their heads. Let's start at the beginning. It's the late 1800s, and paleontologists are just starting to explore the famous Burgess Shale in British Columbia, Canada. This site would eventually become one of the most important fossil deposits in the world, giving us an unprecedented window into Cambrian life. But back then, they had no idea what they were about to uncover. The first Anomalocaris fossil was discovered in 1892. Well, sort of. See, what they actually found was a pair of weird, segmented appendages that looked vaguely shrimp-like. The scientist who described them, Joseph Frederick Whiteaves, looked at these fossils and went, "Okay, clearly this is some kind of primitive shrimp." Hence the name Anomalocaris, abnormal shrimp. Case closed, right? Wrong. So very, very wrong. Fast forward a bit, and paleontologists start finding these strange, circular fossils that looked like someone had taken a pineapple ring, shrunk it down, and added what appeared to be plates arranged in a ring. Weird, sure, but not that weird. The obvious conclusion? Jellyfish. Obviously. They even gave it a name, Paleontology, a nice, simple Cambrian jellyfish. Everyone was happy with this explanation. And then they found the body fossils. Large, segmented, vaguely oval-shaped things with lateral lobes running down the sides. These got classified as sea cucumbers and given yet another name, Lagania. So now we've got 3 separate creatures: Anomalocaris the shrimp, Paleontology the jellyfish, and Lagania the sea cucumber, all just hanging out in the Cambrian seas doing their own thing. Except they weren't doing their own thing. They were all doing the same thing, because they were all the same animal, and it took scientists almost a century to figure that out. Here's the wildest part. This creature shouldn't have even existed. The breakthrough moment, and I mean the moment that changed everything, came in the 1980s when paleontologist Harry Whittington and his team were re-examining Burgess Shale fossils. And one of his students, Derek Briggs, was looking at what they thought was another Lagania specimen when he noticed something that didn't quite fit. There were these strange appendages near what would have been the front of the animal, appendages that looked suspiciously like, wait a minute, like those shrimp fossils they'd been finding. The ones called Anomalocaris. And then someone had the brilliant idea to look at where the jellyfish fossils, the Paleontology specimens, were positioned relative to the body fossils, and guess what? They were always at the front, right where a mouth would be. Oh, it's all one animal. Can you imagine that moment? The realization that for nearly 100 years, they'd been looking at pieces of the same creature and classifying them as 3 completely different species? That has to be simultaneously the most embarrassing and most exciting moment in a paleontologist's career. Like, oops, we've been catastrophically wrong for a century. But holy cow, look at what we actually found, because what they found was an absolute monster. And when I say monster, I mean that in the most literal, awe-inspiring, nightmare-inducing way possible. Let me paint you a picture of what Anomalocaris actually looked like, now that we've figured out all the pieces go together. Imagine this: a ripple of fins gliding through blue haze, eyes gleaming like disco balls of death. This thing was massive for the Cambrian period. When most animals were finger-length, this thing hit a meter, up to 3 feet in length, though some species may have been even larger. In a time when most creatures were measuring in at a few centimeters, Anomalocaris was basically Godzilla, one of the undisputed kings of the food chain. At the front, it had a pair of segmented spiny appendages, those shrimp parts that started this whole confusion. These weren't legs or antennae. They were grasping claws covered in spines, specifically designed for one purpose: grabbing prey and shoving it toward that nightmare mouth. And oh, buddy, let's talk about that mouth. The mouth of Anomalocaris is the stuff of Lovecraftian horror. Remember those jellyfish fossils? Yeah, that was its mouth. A circular arrangement of dozens of overlapping plates that could open and close like a biological trash compactor. Imagine a pineapple ring made of death. Or better yet, imagine the Sarlacc pit from Star Wars, shrunk down and attached to a swimming predator. All those plates working together to close on prey. Crunch. Now here's where it gets even weirder. For the longest time, scientists thought this mouth was powerful enough to crush hard-shelled prey like trilobites. Made sense, right? Apex predator, powerful jaws, crush the competition. Except when they started doing biomechanical studies on the mouth structure, they found something surprising. It probably wasn't strong enough to crack hard shells. The plates might have been able to grasp and slice soft-bodied prey, or maybe trilobites that had just molted and were still vulnerable, but crushing armored prey. That's debatable. Fresh 2023 biomechanics shows Anomalocaris was fast, but not a shell crusher. More soft prey sniper than trilobite-smashing tank. So what was it eating? Probably soft-bodied animals, freshly molted prey, possibly even scavenging. We're still not entirely sure. Even after figuring out what this animal actually looked like, we're still debating how exactly it ate. The body itself was segmented with lateral lobes, basically swimming flaps, running down each side. And this is where things get fascinating from an evolutionary perspective. Those lobes. Recent biomechanical and modeling work suggests the lateral flaps moved in elegant, wave-like ripples, creating undulating motions that propelled the animal through the water. Think of a segmented manta ray, gliding through prehistoric seas with hypnotic, flowing movements. But what scientists found next flipped the story on its head. Again, oh, and did I mention the eyes? Because Anomalocaris had amazing eyes. Compound eyes, similar to modern insects and crustaceans, with thousands of individual lenses. Some of the best preserved examples, described in Nature in 2011, show eyes with over 16,000 lenses. For context, a modern dragonfly has about 30,000. So this thing had excellent vision, could probably see in multiple directions at once, and used those eyes to hunt in the murky Cambrian seas. Put it all together, and you've got a creature that's like someone threw a shrimp, a squid, and a nightmare into a blender and hit prehistoric apex predator. Spiny grasping arms, compound eyes, a circular chomping mouth, a segmented body with swimming lobes, and a size that made it one of the largest predators of its time. And the craziest part, this wasn't even one species. Anomalocaris is actually a genus with multiple species, and the broader group, Anomalocaridids or radiodonts, includes even more bizarre variations. There was Amplectobelua, which had even more elaborate grasping appendages. Herdia, which had a strange, elongated structure on its head that might have been some kind of sensory organ. And then in 2015, a spectacular Ordovician radiodont called Anomalocaris, showed paired swimming flaps with gill-like cetal blades, and it was even a filter feeder, not a biter. Evolution was just going absolutely wild with this body plan. But here's what really blows my mind about Anomalocaris. It represents a turning point in the history of life on Earth. The Cambrian explosion itself was the true evolutionary revolution. That moment when life went from simple to complex in a geological eye blink. And Anomalocaris? It was at the forefront of one of that revolution's most important innovations: specialized predation. Before this, life was mostly simple, small, and frankly pretty boring. Microbes, some basic multicellular organisms, not much going on. Then the Cambrian explosion happened, and suddenly complex body plans emerged everywhere. And Anomalocaris was likely one of the first, if not the first, apex predators with specialized hunting equipment. Those grasping appendages? That's specialized predation. That mouth? That's specialized predation. Those eyes. You get the idea. This wasn't just some animal stumbling around hoping to bump into food. This was an active, visual hunter with tools specifically designed for catching and eating other animals. In other words, Anomalocaris helped invent the concept of eat or be eaten. It created the evolutionary arms race that would define life for the next 500 million years. Prey evolved defenses like shells and spines specifically because predators like Anomalocaris existed. And those defenses meant predators had to evolve better weapons, which meant better defenses, which meant better weapons, on and on until you get to the modern world where we have everything from armored beetles to great white sharks. Anomalocaris started that. This weird, misidentified 3 animals in one creature kicked off one of the most important dynamics in evolutionary history. And yet, despite all the research, all the specimens we've found, all the papers written about it, Anomalocaris still keeps surprising us. In 2011, researchers described those incredible compound eyes I mentioned. By 2019 to 2021, new fossils and 3D functional studies showed even more variation in the grasping appendages and their range of motion than we thought possible. Every few years, someone finds something new, and we have to revise our understanding all over again. It's like Anomalocaris is still pranking scientists from beyond the grave. Oh, you think you've got me figured out? Here's another weird feature you didn't know about. Have fun updating your textbooks. But perhaps the biggest mystery isn't about Anomalocaris itself. It's about why it disappeared. This creature dominated the Cambrian seas for millions of years. It was perfectly adapted, supremely successful, the apex of apex predators. And then, like everything else from the Cambrian, it vanished. Not in a single extinction event, but gradually, as environmental changes during the Cambrian Ordovician transition reshaped the oceans, and new predators evolved. By the end of the Cambrian period, around 485 million years ago, Anomalocaris and its relatives were gone, replaced by new predators, new body plans, new evolutionary experiments. The arms race it started continued without it. Evolution moved on, and for nearly 500 million years, it remained buried in rocks, waiting to confuse the heck out of paleontologists who would find it piece by piece and spend a century trying to put it back together. You know what gets me about this whole story? It's not just that scientists were wrong for so long, it's that they were wrong in the most understandable way possible. When you find a circular fossil with plates, jellyfish is a pretty reasonable guess. When you find segmented appendages with spines, weird shrimp makes sense. And when you find a segmented oval body with lobes, sea cucumber isn't a crazy conclusion. The problem wasn't that scientists were being stupid or careless. The problem was that Anomalocaris was so unlike anything else that our brains couldn't process it as a single creature. We had no frame of reference. It would be like if aliens came to Earth, found a disassembled car, and classified the wheels as one species, the engine as another species, and the chassis as a third species, because they'd never seen a vehicle before and couldn't conceive of how these parts would work together. Anomalocaris broke our understanding of what Cambrian animals should look like. And in doing so, it taught us a valuable lesson. Nature doesn't care about our expectations. Evolution doesn't read our textbooks. And sometimes the truth is stranger than anything we could imagine. So where does that leave us? Well, we know a lot more about Anomalocaris than we did in 1892. We know it was one animal, not three. We know it was an apex predator. We know it had amazing eyes and terrifying mouthparts and specialized hunting appendages. We've got dozens of species described, hundreds of specimens, countless papers, but we still don't know everything. We're still figuring out exactly what it ate. We're still finding new species with new variations. And honestly, that's kind of beautiful. Because it means that even after all this time, even after all this research, Anomalocaris still has mysteries to share. It's still teaching us things about evolution, about predation, about the Cambrian explosion. It's still, in its own way, the apex predator. Not of the seas, but of paleontological puzzles. And I think that's fitting. Because if there's one thing Anomalocaris taught us from the very beginning, it's that nothing in paleontology is ever as simple as it seems. What looks like three animals might be one. What looks like a jellyfish might be a mouth. What looks like a shrimp might be a weapon. And what looks like we've got it all figured out? Well, that just means we're due for another surprise. Thanks for watching, and remember, before scientists understood what they were looking at, they built a monster from spare parts. And the monster turned out to be real. 500 million years later, Anomalocaris still hunts our imagination. If evolution has a sense of humor, Anomalocaris was the punchline and the setup.